Hey listeners, it's Leah, and this is our last episode in the career series where we've pulled conversations from Jessi Hempel's Hello Monday. Today, Jessi talks to Lisa Orbe-Austin. She's a psychologist, an executive coach, and an author of a recent book called Own Your Greatness: Overcoming Impostor Syndrome, Beating Self-Doubt, and Succeeding in Life. She'll be on my show to dive deeper into what's underneath imposter syndrome and much more in the fall. Now, here's what I loved about this episode. First of all, Lisa and I share a viewpoint. While we both study and are fascinated by psychology, we see the need to pull it out of the theoretical and research-driven world and into the real world. She is putting the humanity back into this work of psychology, which is truly the human experience. And that is what this show is all about. And Lisa sort of sits at the intersection of psychotherapy and career, which is why I thought this would be a really valuable episode for you. And it's no surprise that our conversation with Jessi is about personal transformations that leave their marks on our work lives too. And of course, where and how imposter syndrome shows up and what to do about it. So first, what is imposter syndrome? It's when we have the skills, the accomplishments, the abilities, and the credentials, but we have not internalized it. So what we tend to do then is overwork ourselves, embrace self-doubt, or even self-sabotage in order to cover ourselves. Now, if we aren't part of the lucky few who truly know what they want to do from an early age, I definitely wasn't one of them, something shakes us from our stupor and causes us to wake up to a path that we actually want to go down versus the one that we were told to go down. And this is that prime place that imposter syndrome definitely lives. What I love is that Lisa tells us what to do about it. She says we can watch the way that we speak to ourselves. And she uses a great acronym that's easy to remember and I think aptly named for what these are, which is ANT. They're automatic negative thoughts. They're a response to a trigger. And they're automatic because they are on what we call neural pathways. These thoughts travel down neural pathways, and the easiest way to think about a neural pathway is like a freeway. So if we continue to go down the freeway over and over again, it's really hard to choose a different path, right? Because it becomes natural to us. When we can actually engage ourselves and ask ourselves if what we're saying about ourselves to ourselves is true, we can start to regroove that neural pathway or create a new freeway. Now, the reality of what she talks about too is you never get over imposter syndrome, but you deal with it differently. Now, I'm someone who is deeply committed to working on my own inner skills. And as you continue to do this, here's what you notice. It never goes away. Your self-doubt, your fears don't ever go away. But what happens is there is less and less time that it takes for you to bounce back from tough experiences, from triggers, and from emotional upheaval. So take a listen. I hope you enjoy as much as I do, and look out for Lisa Orbe-Austin and me coming your way this fall.
From the news team at LinkedIn, I'm Jessi Hempel, and this is Hello Monday, our show about the changing nature of work and how that work is changing us. We've heard from a number of guests since we started making the show who question the very notion of a career. Trying to get satisfaction and paycheck from the same place. They say it's fine to just get a job, any job, and then do the thing you love. Well, today's guest gets that perspective, but she definitely doesn't share it.
There's a lot of really complicated things happening that didn't happen 30 years ago in the same way. But I get worried about this idea of that you are just be a widget in the machine and just get a job.
That's Dr. Lisa Orbe-Austin. She's a counseling psychologist who focuses on careers. Think therapist meets coach. Lisa's clients find her when they need help on everything from making a career transition to figuring out how to reach for the next rung on that ladder. Today, we're going to talk about careers, about how to be proactive about managing them. And we'll go deep on imposter syndrome. Ugh, the word. I can't even say it without having a slight physical reaction of disgust. Because it took years for me to overcome it, and sometimes I still struggle with it. Lisa knows how that is. Along with her husband, Rich Orbe-Austin, Lisa has written a book on it. Literally. It's called Own Your Greatness: overcome imposter syndrome, beat self-doubt, and succeed in life. I started by asking Lisa how she got into her profession.
So many of us, we get trained, we have like many classes on this, we have to take externships on this, but many of us hate it because the way it's taught is very didactic, it's very theoretical, and we often feel like a lot of us do this for like the humanity of it, the identity of it, like those pieces. So for me, I took the classes and hated it, and I thought I'd never do this again. I just got to get the requirement done. And then I met my husband, who was my colleague at the time. And it was his passion, it was his love, it was his dissertation, it was everything he thought about, because he always would say the personal is professional and the professional personal, which is a very common saying for us. And he helped me to understand that. And then I started to realize, oh, there's something really meaty here around identity.
You just described something that intellectually sounded so interesting to me, which is, if I understood you right, you were studying the very idea of a career, where the idea of a career comes from, how people orient to that over the course of their life. But it was too academic? It was too didactic?
Yeah, very research-based, very theoretical. We would look at sort of models of career development, and they were very staid, and it took the humanity out of it for many of us. And so it was really about just learning the concepts, learning the philosophies, learning the testing, learning the metrics of all of it, which is now fascinating to me. I think when you introduce this stuff to people, you really have to bring in the humanity of it and then bring in the other pieces.
Right.
They didn't do that. So I felt very disconnected from it. I was like, what does this have to do with people? It wasn't until my postdoctoral supervisor, she taught me how it works and how like psychotherapy and career intersect.
So that really is what you're talking about. You're talking about meeting people. Do you call them your patients? Your clients?
I call them my clients because, I think patients can be so pathologizing.
So you meet your clients where they are, and you're using techniques that I might think of as therapy to help them understand more deeply their relationship to their careers?
Yep. Yeah, and how that relates to their identity, how that intersects with different parts of their lives, how it brings meaning to their lives. I get to use all the tools that I was taught in this very holistic way, which is, for me, like the dream.
So Lisa, you said that you had trouble falling in love with it till you met your husband and the way that he spoke about it. So tell me about that.
I really, like I said, I thought it was really boring. And so he was doing his dissertation on Black men and the impact of identity on their development. And so I thought it was really fascinating how he was really curious about these ideas that I was always really passionate about related to identity and how they relate to career. And he was just talking about it in this way that I really connected to, because for me, it was really about the passion of identity, like understanding who people are, why they are the way they are, why they choose the things that they choose. And he was connecting that for career to me as a colleague. We were just talking about these things, engaging in it. And I was like, oh, now I get why this could be interesting. It doesn't have to be so academic. And it's about real people's lives, real people's identities, real people's development. And that was what I think brought me into it. As I fell in love with him, I fell in love with the concept of career.
I love that. It's a mutual falling in love.
Yes.
Do most people who pursue this path end up doing the work that you're doing? Or are you taking a more unusual approach to using the skill set?
I'm taking a very unusual approach to using the skill set. A lot of the people that I work with and I refer to, I have trained. And it's because we do have the basic skill sets, but then we have not taught how to apply them in the context of a therapeutic room. And so I have done a lot of training of my colleagues so that I can help refer other people to them. And it is very rare. Like I actually got a contact today from a graduate student at a local university saying, can I talk to you about how you got to do with what you do? There's not a lot of people out there that do what you do.
What are the challenges that you see coming up for your clients over and over?
Well, I mean, like imposter syndrome was one of them. It actually is what drew us to writing the book, is that we see that phenomenon so predominantly in our practice. The other things that we typically see are people who have made a particular choice in their career paths around maybe stability and security and other kind of value sets, but then realize it's hard to fulfill a lifetime on that and feel disconnected from the work and don't feel passionate about it and need to kind of transition. We see a lot of people with struggles with advancement. Like, I don't know how to get to the next rung. I don't even sometimes know what the next rung is. So helping people career path and understand how the developmental pathways work in different career tracks.
That could be 3 episodes for us right there.
Yeah, I know. That career ladder is a nightmare. And it takes a lot of nuanced understanding of what's happening in people's careers, which is something else I love about the field, is like, it allows me to dive into all these different career paths and get to like know them really, really well, which I kind of fell in love with.
I want to go deep on imposter syndrome, but before we do, I want to back up to this idea of a career a second. We've had a few people on the show over the course of the last year and a half who've basically trashed the idea of a career. They've said, you don't need a career. A career is a very 21st century idea. It's a 21st century relationship to work. It's fine if you just have a job and do the thing that you love. So you want to be a writer? Go work at a restaurant and be a writer. And I'm just curious from your perspective, what you're laughing at me.
Yes,
our listeners can't see this, but you are laughing at me.
That flies in the face of everything I think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just is not how we get taught the meaning of career and how we help people decide around career. But there are some careers where if you miss a step, you can't make it up the next rung of the ladder, and so it's really important in some places to really understand that ladder. And in some places it's not. In some places you can have a much more varied career and do a bunch of things and be in a bunch of different places. It really depends on what you want to do. I do understand it, but it's not the main philosophy that I use around this idea that just get jobs and then your career will evolve. I think it feels like very haphazard career development practices as opposed to you're making a choice. And that choice has meaning. You're making choices even if someone is dragging you along in your pathway. I do believe in the process of choice and that you are crafting a vision for what it's going to look like.
Do you think that any of the voice that is raising this sort of critique of careers, that you don't need one, that you can just go get a job, do you think that it's a reaction to the fact that that career ladder felt more predictable 2 or 3 decades ago and seems a lot harder to articulate and define in 2020?
I think that it is much harder, right? I think in some fields it's really straightforward, like accounting is really straightforward, like how you get through the pathway. I'm having conversations with clients on the way to becoming CFOs, and the route can be very ambiguous about how you get to be a CFO. It is ambiguous. It feels scary, and so you feel like you should take anything. But you can't really just take anything, in some cases. And in some cases, I think you probably could if you want to be a writer and you just need to support yourself and you just need a job that just pays the bills. But I think you also still have to make strategic career decisions around being a writer. Like, who are you surrounding yourself with? What's happening with your training? You still have to kind of path in some way. And maybe it's, kind of non-traditional, but you're still pathing. If you want to be successful in the field, it just can't be sort of whatever happens.
Yeah.
I also think it's somewhat dangerous a little bit. I do feel like the economy is really complicated right now and sort of what happens to people's careers. There's a lot of really complicated things happening that didn't happen 30 years ago in the same way. But I get worried about this idea of that you are just be a widget in the machine and just get a job and just fit in where people need you, as opposed to having some agency and autonomy about how you draw that vision.
So let's talk about imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
As I was diving into your thoughts on it, the first thing that jumped to me was that I have always thought of imposter syndrome as something that in particular happens to women and people of color. And you really expanded my thinking on that by saying, actually, we all have reason to feel less than or like we don't belong, and we express it in different ways. So yeah. I wonder if you might just start by explaining what you mean by imposter syndrome.
Sure. So imposter syndrome is the phenomenon where when you have skills, accomplishments, abilities, credentials, and you haven't internalized them, that you then feel very concerned about being exposed as a fraud. And as a result of that fear of exposure, you either overwork or self-sabotage in order to cover this experience of fearing exposure as a fraud. So 40 years ago, the concept was developed by Doctors Clance and Imes, 2 female psychologists who were working in a counseling center in Georgia, and seeing this phenomenon in the academic staff and grad students. And then we're like, what is going on here? And they were working largely with women. And I think they initially thought for a long time that it was predominantly in women. I think they researched it mostly focused on women. I know that. I don't think I know it. But later on, they started to look at men and they started to see it in equal numbers in men. They just saw the expression of it a little bit different. And the expression that they saw typically, women tend to embrace the counterphobia of it. So they'll be counterphobic. They will sort of have the fear and face it and do the thing. And they'll just live in the imposter syndrome constantly. where men will go engage in more of a saving face experience where they will avoid the high stakes and high performance things and go somewhere where they can be the top performer. And so they will typically put themselves in situations that are less threatening to their imposter syndrome. So they have to face it less often, but it means also that they typically underperform.
You came to this research out of personal experience, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So, I mean, I've had imposter syndrome. I still, clearly, we always say you're never going to get over it. It's never going to be done. And I just deal with it differently than I did back then. And so, I think for many years of my life, I often felt like, I was getting things by accident or as a result of like a relationship that I had developed, or like it just felt like everything was not about my skills, my abilities. It felt largely about my ability to work hard. That if I could put my mind to something, if I could work hard at something, I could get it, but it had nothing to do with my skills, talent, intellect, nothing. And so oftentimes people think, oh, if I get this next credential or if I get this next job, I'm not going to feel the imposter syndrome. It just makes it worse.
Yes.
Because frankly, when I got my PhD from Columbia, like my imposter syndrome was at its height. And I tell a story in my TEDx talk about how, I was in like one of the worst jobs of my life and being treated incredibly poorly and was paralyzed to leave it. And I had this doctorate and I had all these credentials and I had 2 master's degrees, and I just couldn't do anything for months. For months, this guy was just making me feel really down and depressed. And it wasn't till, he did something really awful. And I'll tell you this briefly, the story, which is I was in a senior leadership meeting and there was music playing in the background, and someone asked, what is this music that's playing? And he said, it's music to soothe the savage breast. And when he said it, it was like, oh, the lights went on in my head. I was like, oh my God, like, what am I putting up with? What have I done to myself? It was like my life flashed before my eyes. And I was like, I'm out of here. And I called my husband in my office and I was like, I'm quitting. And he's like, quit now. And so cleared out my office on Monday morning. I quit the job. And he cried and he yelled at me. He threatened my career. He did all of that stuff. And I was terrified. I had a panic attack when I got home. But I knew I had to do that for myself because it was getting worse and worse. And actually, to be honest, I just found out they just fired the guy after 15 years. So it suggested how protected he was for so long.
Wow. Lisa, I so appreciate the way that you told that story because I'm sure a lot of our listeners can relate. I can certainly relate to being in a prestigious job, working for people who were not able to see what I was bringing, feeling like even if you can step out intellectually of that moment and you can look at the situation, you might say to yourself, well, another person in that situation, if it were like a good person, a person who we knew for sure were good at doing that job, you would tell them to leave.
Yeah.
But it's me.
Yeah.
And the worse it gets, the smaller you get.
Yeah.
And it's really, really hard to disrupt that cycle.
It is super hard to disrupt the cycle because even like disclosing what was happening to me and telling people, because I knew I needed help. And so I was telling people, but it was embarrassing. And when I didn't quit the job immediately or I didn't leave it, or like they were like, what's going on with you? Why can't you leave? It was becoming like just progressively humiliating. And so it feels like this kind of really difficult place to kind of disrupt.
So do you, in your professional life now, work with people on disrupting that cycle?
Yeah. Yeah.
So walk us through it.
It is so amazing to get to do that and to kind of be able to help people disrupt it. It's really a variety of things that are happening. And so it's really kind of impacting all of those things as much as I possibly can. So it's like helping people to understand how the thing got started and really understanding the origins of it, because oftentimes the origins are deep. And as a result of the deep origins, we have to disrupt some of those deep origins, kind of do some healing, do some unpacking and work around that. It's also about really helping people to watch the narrative, watch the way they speak to themselves, watch what they tell other people about themselves, how they narrate things inside their head. So we're watching all of that sort of languaging stuff. We're watching the automatic negative thoughts that happen as a result of the trigger and how to interrupt them with a rational response. We're teaching people how to take care of themselves better. So there's a bunch of things that we're doing.
That negative thoughts piece, I'd love to hear you expand on that a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a long time to really regroove those thoughts. It's like a neural pathway. And so to regroove the neural pathway in another direction takes a lot of work and takes a lot of intentionality. around how you do that. So a lot of my clients will fight me initially, like when I'm asking them to like do something very conscious and like do the rational responding. And they'll be like, well, I don't believe it yet. And I was like, yeah, I know. Part of our work is to kind of work to find evidence to contradict the automatic thought and continue to practice the thought anyway, even when you don't have any evidence, or you feel like you don't have any evidence. So it's really it's really a fight, and we have to engage the fight.
If a career unfolds over many decades of our adulthood, is there a period in our adulthood where we're most likely to come up against this?
I think it depends on the context, right? I think it depends, like, are you experiencing imposter syndrome in a space where you should be an expert, or should you not be an expert? And if it's not, you're not an expert, you shouldn't have that competence. The feelings of fraudulence you may be feeling may be more about a developmental experience of kind of learning a skill, or as opposed to you do have the skill and you have proven it over time, and yet you still have this feeling of fraudulence.
When your clients come to see you and to work with you, how can you tell if they're going to be able to make progress with you?
That's a great question. I love that question. I'm looking for somebody who I feel like can partner with me, that doesn't see me as an expert, but sees me as a potential partner in this. Because if you rely on me to magic wand you, it's not going to happen. Like, you need to be a collaborator in this. And so I look for people who are good at partnering in their world, in their lives, good at partnering, with other people in any kind of context. I think that's really critical. I think people who are good at really being responsible for their behavior in a way that makes them feel like they have agency around it, as opposed to I have no control. Things happen to me. Like, in those kinds of states, it's much harder to convince somebody that they can get agency when they already have this sort of victimized mindset. There's a lot to work on before we even get to the work. I look for people who really are sick of it, too, like, are not just like, oh, this bugs me, but are like, it's really blocking me. And they feel motivated for change because they can see the real consequences of the imposter syndrome.
For people who may not have the opportunity to work with you or somebody like you, are there any tools that you recommend to help people to start to take on these ideas on their own?
Yeah, I mean, my book is full of tools. A couple of them specifically are in the book around teaching them how to rationally respond, how to identify the automatic negative thought, label it, and then also understand how to rationally respond to it. Develop in some ways scripts to actually rationally responding to something, so that when they come up, you have a sort of route or a planned route to kind of go down to contradict them. We also do a lot of things on our book about self-care. We're big believers that people with imposter syndrome are really bad at caring for themselves, because everyone's opinion of them matters more than their opinion of themselves in the ways that they kind of see self-worth in their own experience. So we're often teaching people how to actually structure self-care, what kinds of self-care matter, what is self-care. So like, that is so important to us. As I'm a psychologist, there's a bunch of activities in there that are just very much looking at like family patterns that are important. Really, I have a family genogram exercise because I think that oftentimes these things are reflective in the family system. And so I like want to get you to like, I'm using all the fun tools that I use with my clients that I feel like have worked, because, Richard and I are about like, insight's important, but action is more important. It is what executes the insight to make a change.
So to go back to closer to the beginning of our conversation, you also referenced like a thing that you see that clients come to you about, which is when the thing that they're doing isn't a thing that's bringing them passion.
Yeah.
How would you characterize that moment in your clients' lives? What's going on there?
I think the world of work changes so often nowadays that you can enter into a career and it can be satisfying when you do enter it. 10 years later, it's something different and you hate it. And also, like, you can make choices when you're 21, 22 that don't make sense for your life when you're 32 and 42. So I think all kinds of interesting things are occurring. I think one of the things that I have such compassion for is that moment is frightening. It is groundswellingly frightening, because it is about, those, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's really about that bottom level, right? Work and paying for your ability to kind of sustain security in a home. My job is to really, in essence, especially in the beginning, is to create a containment space to be like, we're going to figure this out. We're going to try to do it in a way that doesn't disrupt your life or kind of create some kind of chaos. And we're going to do it in whatever way you need, and so, I've been doing this for so long. I'm really good at sort of thinking about for people, okay, can you sustain a radical change? Like, let's look at the brass tacks of this, right? Like, can you really do that? Or do you need to pivot in small increments to make the change? And we're going to do it over a longer period of time. And so we're talking about all those really even practical things about life that, are important to figure out, how do we make this change in a way that is sustainable and doesn't create disruption in a way that's terrifying.
Often when people get to the place where they're like, I need to make a career change, it's not always the case that the thing they're doing isn't working on the outside. Maybe they're making enough money. Maybe they know how to do the thing that they're doing.
Yep.
It's that they've started to die a little bit on the inside.
Yep.
And it takes so much courage to decide that that's not good enough. And I'm curious what the thing is that causes people to open that door and go through to a thing that they don't know.
And I don't know if it's one thing, at least not in my experience. Like, it seems like sometimes it's a bunch of things. Like you were saying, like sometimes, something just shifts in them, right? They change as a person. The things that were once desirable are no longer desirable about the career. Sometimes they burn out of a career. Certain careers are like banking and like they're incredibly intense for long periods of time. And then it's hard to do it in your 40s and 50s. So there are a lot of different reasons why people sort of reach that. Something happens in a workplace that is hallmark to things that have been happening to them all along, and they just can't take it anymore. They're too much of an adult to take it anymore. So there's a lot of different interesting points of crisis. But it does feel fundamentally about something identity-wise, at least for me, around something changes for them and the way that career relates to their life that doesn't work anymore.
How does your own path through your career change the way that you're able to have empathy for, connection to the places where your clients are?
I've been in career crisis before. I think, I didn't tell the story, but, when I went into my freshman year, I always thought I was going to be a pediatrician. I was bio pre-med and I practically failed out of college trying to be bio pre-med. And it was so bad that, I remember being in that chem class and there was a hole in my test tube and I got hydrochloric acid on my hands. And so they had to put me in the shower and do all that stuff to kind of get all the acid off. And then they told me I'm going to have to redo the lab. And this is when I was failing and doing very poorly. I was going to have to spend another 3 hours that evening back in the lab. And I remember walking home in a haze and laying down on the landing of my dorm and just crying and just for an hour, just crying on the land. I think people probably passed me. I don't even remember what happened. I went into some kind of fugue state. And it just felt like all my dreams crashing in front of me and I couldn't stop it. There was nothing I could do. I couldn't figure it out. And I remember being in the dean's office and the dean saying to me, you got to figure this out. You got to decide something. You got to get a new major, something, but you're going to fail out of here. And then I can't do anything. So I remember deciding at that point I was going to change my major to English because, I was doing well in English. And I remember going home. My parents didn't go to college. And so they really didn't have a lot of resources or knowledge to be able to tell me what to do. And I told my dad I was changing my major to English. And it was like all of his dreams went crashing down beside him. He was so angry, yet frustrated and sad. And he was like, I can't believe this. You speak English. Like, what is this? He just lost it. And he didn't talk to me for 3 months because he was just devastated. And he thought I was just going to blow my life up. And, I remember having to be like, okay, he's not talking to me. I'm in trouble in the sense that he's not supporting me right now. And he said to me before he stopped talking to me, he said, I must get a 3.7 in the following semester or he was going to pull me out of school. And he didn't know what a 3.7 was. He didn't go to college. So he had no idea how it was to turn a 1.7 into a 3.7, which is nearly impossible. And so I was like, I got to figure this out on my own. I got to figure this out. And I really then just put my nose to the grindstone and got a 3.9 that following semester and was able to stay in school.
Wow.
And it taught me that it is possible. At the time, I didn't know about career development. I didn't know how to make good, solid decisions. I didn't know I could see a career counselor and figure out through testing what to do next. I just went to what am I good at? What can I excel at? That's what I'm going to do. And it happened again. It happened again as I was a senior in college. I thought I was going to go and be a writer. And I was in my senior year capstone class and I had a professor who was a writer and it was so exciting. And, she had done all these books and she had us writing a novella. And I was working on the novella and she hated it. She not only hated it, she turned the entire class against me. So they were 11 kids in the class saying, oh my God, this stuff is drivel. It's horrible. Week after week, it was excruciating. And then I was like, well, maybe this is evidence I can't write. And, I can't do this. And I went home after I graduated from college and was like, I got to figure out what to do next through, let me admit, through a massive depression. I've had to figure that out. And, and then I was like, okay, what can I go next? What else? What other skills do I have? What other things do I like? And I had been an RA and I was like, well, maybe, I'll think about being a counselor.
As I listen to that story, and thank you for sharing it, I also just think about the impact that we all have on each other that we don't really think about.
Yeah.
I think about the writing teacher who turned you off to craft, maybe for life. I hope you come back to it.
Yeah. The book for me was the first opportunity to really write in that way that felt public in that way. So it was a very healing process to write it.
I don't think you've said the name of the book aloud on the show, which I'm just going to say. The next time you do a podcast, within the first 60 to 90 seconds, you get the name of the book in.
Thank you for that. I will do that. Yeah.
What's the name of the book?
The name of the book is Own Your Greatness, Overcome Impostor Syndrome, Beat Self-Doubt, and Succeed in Life.
And where can people find it if they want to find it?
It's in all major booksellers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, IndieBound. And it's all in all versions. It's Kindle, hard copy, actually soft copy, but and Audible. So.
Well, thank you. It was great to have you on the show. I'd love to do it again. Yeah. I mean, I feel like there are many, many things to unpack on the topic of careers.
Yeah, I would be more than happy to come back.
That was Lisa Orbe-Austin. You can check out her book, Own Your Greatness, Overcome Imposter Syndrome, Beat Self-Doubt, and Succeed in Life. I loved talking to Lisa. I really do want to have her back. So if there's anything you'd love to hear her weigh in on, drop us a line at hellomonday@linkedin.com. And I just learned so much about imposter syndrome. I hope you'll join me this week to talk about it over on Hello Monday Office Hours. My producer, Sarah Storm, and I get together every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern to go live from my LinkedIn profile. It's our coffee break, a chance to visit with listeners and talk about the episode. Is imposter syndrome something we grow out of, or is it more likely we grow into it? I hope you'll come and share your thoughts with us. You can find us by following me on LinkedIn. If you like the show, please rate us on Apple Podcasts. It really helps new listeners find us. Hello Monday is a production of LinkedIn. The show is produced by Sarah Storm with help from Madison Schaefer. Joe DeGiorgi mixed our show. Florencia Iriando is head of original audio and video. Dave Pond is our technical director. Victoria Taylor and Juliette Farreau belong on our team, no doubt. Our music was composed just for us by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder, and you also heard music from Poddington Bear. Dan Roth is the editor-in-chief of LinkedIn. I'm Jessi Hempel. See you next Monday. Thanks for listening.
In the Arena is hosted by me, Leah Smart, and produced by the amazing LinkedIn Media production team. If you like our show, make sure you subscribe, rate, and write a quick review on Apple Podcasts. It helps us get this work out to more of the people who benefit from it. And if you want to connect directly, for now, you can email us at inthearena@linkedin.com. We'll see you in a few weeks to kick off season 4, and I cannot wait to continue this journey with you. Thanks for listening.